Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling, and glad to have you along for this one. This is a review episode of an album that's been out for a little while now from a long-running Canadian melodic rock band. I say long-running; they started in the early '90s, but they're pretty consistent. They had a brief hiatus in the early 2000s, but they came back and they've been putting out albums on a fairly consistent basis. And I'm talking about Harem Scarem, four-piece rock band. They've gone through a few changes. The core members are still in the band. So you've got Harry Hess, lead vocalist, Pete Lesperance on guitar, and he comes and goes. But Darren Smith, he was originally their drummer, but he's also a second vocalist and a backing vocalist. So yeah, I wanted to talk about their latest album, which is called Chasing Euphoria. Now, it's a very reflective. Hang on, take the booklet out here. On Frontiers Records, like their albums have been on for a long, long time now. Think I think since Higher in 2003, and I could be wrong about that. But Harem Scarem's an interesting band because they're Canadian, so I live in Canada, and yet it's hard to find their albums. Once they weren't on Warner Music anymore, which they were on for their first few albums in the '90s, it's got really hard to find their albums. But very consistent band. But the strange thing about it is that their last album, it's been 5 years since their last album, Changed the World. And that album, I got that album and I reviewed that album just just before COVID. I think that was the last episode I did before, the shutdown of the world happened. So changed the world. That was just a weird coincidence. But anyway, so they're back now after a 5 year, that's quite a long time for them considering they hadn't been on hiatus at this point. But they came back with a really, really good album in 13 in I think 2014. And I think I reviewed everything they've done since then. So this album is really, there's no deviation here. It's the tried and true Harem Scarem sound, self-produced again by Harry Hess, Pete Lesperance. All their albums sound good. They've always had a really consistently good sound in their, they're kind of keeping it in-house, which there are a few points that come up as I listen to their last three albums, I would say. And keep in mind, I'm a fan and I support this band. I'm all about Harem Scarem. But there is a bit of um, a sameness to some of the material. In other words, it sounds really good while you're listening to it, but it's hard to recall some of these more recent albums after you've played them. Now, maybe that's just me, but after repeated listenings, they do start to sink in. But I can't fault any one particular component of these albums because they sound great. Vocals are fantastic. I mean, Harry Hess has lost very little of his vocal power. The background vocals are always good. Pete Lesperance is an overlooked guitar hero. Really good player. He's like the Reb Beach of Canada, maybe. I don't know. He's got a little Nuno in him, maybe a little Steve Vai, but really good. And they write great melodic hard rock. I mean, if you've never heard of these guys, the best way I can kind of describe them is they're kind of a cross between Def Leppard and maybe Hagar era Van Halen. If that sounds like your cup of tea, you'll probably like them. If it's not at all your cup of tea, you probably won't like these guys. But let's go through the album. So the first song is the title song, Chasing Euphoria. And the riff to this song is interesting because it's something that they don't normally use, and that's a little bit of a wah. Pete Lesperance is not a wah wah pedal. Wow, 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 wow. It's got a little bit of that to it, which you don't always hear. Up, good, good tune, you know. Um, Next up is Better the Devil You Know. Now, what I think is interesting about this is that it features bass from Andy Curran, who I've had the pleasure of interviewing. But it's bass from Andy Curran on this song, and yet on the last Coney Hatch album, four, there's a song called The Devil You Know. It's a totally different song. I just thought it was an odd coincidence. Also, we've got a guest that's returning on this album. Ray Coburn, original keyboard player from Honeymoon Suite. He played and co-wrote the song Love Reaction on the first Harem Scarem album. He's on about 6 tracks on here on keyboards. Now the keyboards aren't very, they're not very prominent in the mix. It's more just background stuff. Next one is Slow Burn. I mean, all of these songs are really melodic. Um, but like I said, it's hard sometimes to keep them, and you really got to hammer these songs in to get them in your head. And that's no fault of, like, I put the blame on myself because the band's delivering. They're delivering good, consistent music, but I don't know, maybe just not quite enough hooks in these songs to just latch on. So you go, oh yeah, this song goes like this. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Now, the next song stands out for me. I can remember this one, Got to Keep Your Head Up. Now, this is one that Darren Smith sings. Darren is a great singer. Harry Hess is an awesome singer. Darren Smith's really, really good. I mean, ask Jake Keith Lee. That's why he's this, or at least he was, I'm not sure, in Red Dragon Cartel. And I saw Darren Smith live once as Paul Stanley in a Kiss cover band. I think they were called Destroyer, and I'd seen this band before. Originally, the singer was Benny DeRoe. If you're a big Kiss fan, you'll probably know that name. But he wasn't in the band this time. It was the same band, except they had Darren Smith on guitar and vocals. Very versatile. So if you can handle Paul Stanley stuff, you're a really good singer. But yeah, he sings this one. That's super catchy. World on Fire is a sort of a mid-tempo one. Um, and oddly enough, this isn't one that Darren sings. This is one that Harry sings the rest of the songs. But this one kind of reminds me of the song Sentimental Boulevard from their Mood Swings album, probably their best album still. It's kind of got some phrasings in it that remind me of that song. That's pretty good. In a Bad Way is kind of reminds me of and I don't want to keep going back to earlier songs, but if you're a fan of this band and you haven't heard this album yet, this kind of puts you in mind of, okay, it's this type of song. There's a song on their album Karma Cleansing, or Believe, depending on where you bought it, called Die Off Hard. Good song, really good song. This kind of reminds me of that, similar feel, a little bit more mid-tempo. Um, that In a Bad Way, that's that song. The next one is Reliving History, which was the first single, and it was a good choice as first single. It's probably the single catchiest song on this album, and one that sticks. So yeah, really good. Glad they didn't make it the first song though. That's kind of good. So you don't get the familiarity over with, and then you've got a bunch of unfamiliar songs. The human brain is funny that way. You kind of need something to latch onto sometimes. The next one is one of my favorites on the album, actually. Called A Falling Knife. It's kind of got a cool bendy riff. This is a faster one, and I like it when they speed up the tempo a little bit, like Change Comes Around or something like The Paint Thins from the third album, Voice of Reason. That's kind of what this one's kind of an angrier song. You kind of get the idea from the title, A Falling Knife. Understand It All is another good, it's hard to come up with descriptors for this band. Like I like this band a lot. I don't know if I could write a book about Harem Scarem describing their material, because so much of it is just it's good melodic rock, and there's not a lot more to add. Sometimes you don't need to add anything, I guess. And then the final song is another faster one. It is not an Iron Maiden cover. It's called Wasted Years. And this is a faster one, but this has that sort of trademark Harem Scarem thing where it might be a fast beat, but the vocals are kind of elongated. I don't know if that makes any sense, but and that's it. Another consistently good addition to the Harem Scarem collection. It's just a shame that they don't even have a major label distribution in their home country. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's on Frontiers Records. I admire that label for what they do and who they work with. And there you go, Harem Scarem, Chasing Euphoria. And I got one more thing I want to talk about. This is something that the band put out for Record Store Day, and I was really surprised. Really surprised. I got to thank my good friend Matt Phillips for finding this. And we have a running gag. It's a fairly, I'm going to call it a fairly local record store. It's local for him, not so much for me, but it's not that far away. And we've been shopping there for over 30 years. Harem Scarem is not the type of band that this store would normally stock, but somehow, it's like a typical record store day release, you never know who's going to get what. But Matt managed to find me a copy of this. This is a vinyl exclusive. They'll probably eventually put it on a CD, but it's called Harem Scarem Anthology Volume 1. And it's just what it sounds like. It's just a simple 10-song best of from going back to the first album and all the way through to I guess the newest song on here would be Higher from 2003. So that's kind of a cool thing to have. Nothing unreleased on it, but it's kind of a cool cover too. So there you go. This is not a band that gets a lot of discussion, but we got any Harem Scarem fans out there? I want to hear from you. So that's my 2 cents on the new Harem Scarem album, Chasing Euphoria. I'm still, as of this filming, I'm still waiting on the vinyl. The vinyl hasn't shipped yet. So there you go. I want to thank everybody for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions.